Hey y'all, welcome back. I'm Shayna Cersei and I'm so excited to paint with you today. So today we are going to attempt to paint some hot air balloons. Now I have not painted these regularly. I looked at a bunch of images of hot air balloons the other day to try to figure out the best way to kind of tackle this in my journal. So this is very much an experimental day. So I'm so glad you can join me for that. We're going to try to keep it simple because I think hot air balloons and a hot air balloon scene can get very complicated very quickly. So I am going to take out a lot of the details and we are just going to paint some basic shapes and focus on light and shadow. So this is very much a beginner hot air balloon watercolor tutorial. We are going to put them in a setting. We're not just going to paint a hot air balloon kind of on its own. We are going to put them with a sky and a ground. Now, a lot of folks I've noticed in the comments say that landscapes intimidate them. Totally understandable. They can look really complicated, but you can make the most simple landscape so beautiful. So just remember, you just need generally, but to keep it simple, a sky and a ground, and that's basically two different colors of rectangles. Super simple. And in watercolor you can add all kinds of texture and stuff just by applying the paint in a, I don't want to say in a sloppy fashion, but just in like not worrying about trying to keep it perfectly flat in a wash, but leaving some water, leaving some extra paint in different places, and that will create a beautiful sky and ground. So let's do that. What I am going to do is just draw, we are going to do a little drawing just to draw out our hot air balloon shape. So we're just going to do two. And they are, there's a couple different types of hot air balloons, but we're going to do what, you know, a modern day kind of traditional. So it's very wide at the top, like think a light bulb. And it's wider at the top than you think. So we're going to do a big one right here. And then it gets very narrow at the bottom, and the basket is quite small. So we're just going to do a rectangle for the basket with some lines out there. So really big, wide at the top, almost like a full circle. So like if you drew a full circle here and then attached like a triangle or a funnel at the bottom, that's what you want. You don't want it to be too narrow, like a narrow skinny one. That kind of comes to a point. You want nice, wide, and full. And then we're going to do a smaller one, a little bit lower. And so you could draw, let's draw a circle first. Like let's draw a circle and then attach it at the bottom to a tiny, narrow little funnel. Okay? And it's going to be lower down. It's going to be further in the distance. And again, a tiny little basket at the bottom. Needs no detail. Perfect. All right, so let's take out some of the lines in the center of this. So there is our hot air balloon. Now, hot air balloons also have, you can keep them really simple, but where it gets complicated is the light and shadow, in that they are like sewn together pieces of fabric that have this shape to them. Okay, so I just did like a funnel in here. I'm gonna draw these in, but we're really gonna focus on just the light and shadow of the whole shape. All right, so they all come to the point. They're widest at the top, just like the balloon, and come down to a center point. So I always start with the center, almost like a flower petal, I guess. And then right next to it, all right, so there are our two hot air balloons. Now, hot air balloons can have super complicated color patterns on them. We are not going to do that today. We're going to keep it simple with like one or two colors. Otherwise, it can get a little daunting to paint. Super interesting, intricate, beautiful. It would be a great project to take on, but it would take a little bit more time. Okay, so now we have our drawn hot air balloons, and I'm going to put basically a big field that they're going to be over. So here's my field, horizon line, sky, ground, and I made it a little crooked. There we go. But to make this more interesting, you can just do flat wash this way, perfectly fine. To make this more interesting, I am going to have some leading lines of like field coming this way. You don't have to draw these in. We're just going to use our brush in strokes coming in this direction when we get there, okay? Sky is just going to be sky. It's going to be a flat sky, but it's going to be a lot of fun because it's going to be very yellow. I'm going to draw a beautiful sunrise. Not draw, paint. Paint a beautiful sunrise. All right, so let me just clean out this yellow a little bit. There's some green in here, and I want this to be very pure yellow. So let's talk about what I'm painting in and painting on and painting with. This is a Bauhong sketchbook, watercolor sketchbook. It's a approximately 6x9 size. They come in smaller sizes as well. It's 100% cotton paper, 140-pound cold press. I paint on both sides of the paper. It's perfectly textured on either side. So we paint on both sides of every sheet of paper in here. So lots and lots of pages. What else? My Core QOR by Golden watercolor paints. This is my palette. I bought them in tubes, but I put them in a palette. So the palette I bought separate and the paints I put into it. So that way you can customize, or I could customize my palette. And I'm using a silver black velvet brush today. So it's just a brand. It's a round brush, a size 8. But any round brush will do. I have a selection of Princeton brushes, always kind of at the ready, the silver black velvet, and some other random brands as well. But you only need a couple of brushes. All right, so we're going to paint in the sky first, and a little bit of that sky is going to bleed onto our water balloons, and you'll see what I mean. I hope this all works out. Thank you for joining me on this journey. So I'm using Diarylide yellow. It's a warm yellow. All of the colors in my palette, my entire palette list, is in the description of this video, so you can check that out. So if I ever mention a color and you didn't really hear what I said or know how it's spelled, it's in the description. So we're going to take this yellow and we are just going to start painting the edge of this sky over here. Nice juicy wet brush. And now I'm going to rinse out my brush, and I am going to I'm going to let it get on the edge of this balloon here. I'm not going to go all the way across the balloon. Oh, I almost dipped my brush in my coffee. And I'm just going to blend it out, and we're going to blend it all the way across. I can go over the basket. The basket's going to be a nice dark color. Again, no real detail. And then I'm going to let some of that yellow fall on this balloon as well. So it's basically casting this nice bright color from the sun that's coming from this direction. I have a little bit of a line here, and it's really because my paper is actually curving over this way, so it's pushing the paint back this way, so I'm going to help it along a little bit here. And then I'm just going to keep taking this across in this lighter color. And all I'm doing off camera is I'm picking up more water. I'm not rinsing my brush off, like I'm not shaking it out in the water. I'm just picking up more water and moving across the page. All right, so you're gonna keep going, keep going. If you need to add in a little bit more yellow, you definitely can. I really have to I'm going to add in a little bit more dark yellow on this side. And I just lifted my book up so it stops pushing the color back the opposite way. And I know this looks pretty dramatic for a sky, but it's fun. It's at this really beautiful golden sunrise time. I'm not getting too crazy with worrying about perfect realistic skies. We're just going to do a yellow sky, which I think is fun. All right, so we're going to get all the way to the edge. It's going to be really light, almost white at the very edge. This bright, beautiful sun kind of coming out from this direction. All right, beautiful. So fun. Let's do our ground. So we're going to use a combination of sap green and green gold. If you don't have green gold, you can just add some of this yellow to your sap green to create a very yellowy green color. I'll show you what green gold looks like from Core. I'm actually going to put it over in my yellow palette here. But green gold is just this very yellowy, bright green. And I'm going to put that right along the edge here so you can see, like, look how yellow it looks, but it definitely has a green tint to it. If you're feeling crazy and your edge is still wet, you can even let it touch the edge there and it'll bleed up into it a little bit. But I want the top of it to be lighter. Okay, and then we're going to start coming this way. So just all my strokes are kind of coming across this way, across that page instead of being flat. And this will be much more apparent when we add in our darker color. Okay, ready? So now I'm going to take some of my sap green, and if you want it to be even darker, you can add a little Payne's gray. And I'm going to come from the bottom upward in this direction. Again, trying not to make it more complicated than it needs to be. It's bright and sunny up there. It's a little dark and shadowy the further we get away. A little Payne's gray. I love this wet on wet kind of feel to it where things are starting to bleed in. So we're going to pump that up even a little more green gold. Mix these together, let them mix. And then you can let it dry and go do another layer in a little bit. All right, beautiful. We can just leave that how it is for now. I'm actually going to pull out. I'm just pulling out, wiping my brush off. I'm not even rinsing my brush off. I'm just wiping the excess paint off and kind of pulling these streaks across. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to let all of this dry and then we're going to work on our balloons. Okay, so make sure your sky is really dry. Mine's still a little wet. I'm going to dry it with a hand dryer. You can let it dry naturally or you can make it dry with one of these. So this is a nice little heat tool. You can find a link to something similar to this in the description, or you can get them at your local craft store. Most likely they will have them as well. All right, so I'm going to dry mine off. And if you don't have one of these, you could also use a blow dryer just on the lowest velocity setting. So low, but the hottest heat. The highest heat on your blow dryer, lowest velocity. Okay, all right, let's make this dry. All right, we're back. So I am going to, for the colors for this, let me clean out this palette a little bit. We are going to do like a turquoisey blue, a phthalo blue color for the big one. And I think I'm going to do like a turquoisey green. So they're both going to be in that turquoise family. One is going to be a little more blue. One is going to be a little more green. I think that color combo will work good with this yellow and green sky here. only having one truly warm color rather than making, adding in reds and greens and other primaries. I think we'll keep the balloon palette pretty simple. So we have our phthalo blue here. And then for the turquoisey green, I can just add phthalo blue to my sap green that's already there. Well, it's a little, I gotta go a little bit more blue, I think. There we go. Now I've made quite a bit of color because I had a lot of sap green in there. All right, so let's start with this one. And I'm actually gonna make a navy version of this, I think, with a little bit of phthalo and Payne's gray. So we get a really dark version of this, as well as a nice light version of this. And then obviously if you add more water, you get even lighter values. So add a little water here. All right, so with this one, it's brightest on this side. My lightest values are gonna be over there. So I'm gonna start on this side. And you can paint in these sections. And I'm going to add another layer that's going to emphasize them. But I think for today, we are just going to paint a flat wash over these. This is kind of the most simplest way to really focus on just light and shadow of the whole shape versus these individual little shapes. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. So this is the part where I'm like figuring it out as I go. I'm like, painting in each of those individual things will be super complicated. And we are going to get over to this edge here, and we have the yellow on the side of the balloon. We're going to let the blue mix with the yellow, but we want to preserve some of that yellow. So we want to rinse our brush off and just have like a really nice light wash, because this is basically like the sunshine falling onto the edge of the balloon. And I'm even going to add a little more yellow, and it's going to make a greenish tinted yellow. That's okay. All right, so that was round one. We are going to add another layer onto this side. And you can see I am leaving a little bit of stripiness near those edges. Here we go, round three. I'm adding in some of this more navy color. And we'll go even a little darker. Okay, we're gonna have to let it dry, and then we can add in some more details. All right, there we go. Okay, let that dry. Let's move on to our green one in the background. We're gonna do it the same kind of way. Blend this out. Blend it over that strong yellow. Can you add in a little more? Boop, boop, boop. blend, blend. But leaving in some spots. So you can see like these, a few little lighter spots from that first layer. That's when it's going to give you a little bit of texture. So it's not just flat. I'm going to pull out a little color on the center of this. Go. And then we're going to have to let this one dry again as well. All right, so what we can do while we're waiting for those to dry to add another layer on is we can do our little baskets. Now the baskets are really simple. You don't want to overcomplicate these. They're going to be, so they are going to have a little bit of a highlight on them. Let's paint in a little yellow on the corner. And then everything else is going to be a dark brown or a Payne's gray. I'm going to use a raw umber brown color. Just paint in this edge here. And also very delicately paint in the parts that, the strings that hold the basket to the balloon itself. Okay, the one in the back, you don't even have to put the highlight on there. It's so far back and it's so tiny. Just get that in there. Beautiful. All right, so let's see, what else can we do? While those are drying, because I do want to put at least one more layer on them. They look great, I think, as they are. I'm glad I went with these colors. We could add something more to our ground. You could add, let's add some little trees. I'm going to start with this. I don't want to make them too big because otherwise they'll be way out of proportion to the hot air balloons. So I'm just going to add like a little line of trees back here, that yellow. Perfect. And I'm going to take some of that raw umber. So it's just this dark brown, cool brown color that you see there. I'm just going to add a few little trunks and branches, but very minor, just kind of connecting them to the ground. But they're so far away and so tiny, like you're really not going to see a lot of the detail. But what we can do is paint a little bit of a shadow there. So go with some sap green, some of the darker color, and just give these a little shadow in front of them. There we go. Oops. All right, so this is the point where, again, if it is, if you need to let it dry or make it dry, you can do that. If you are out of patience and don't want to add anything else to your landscape. So let's do that. I'm going to make my balloons dry so I can add on that final layer. All right, we're back and my balloons are dry. So we're going to put in our final. Let me get that. Let's start with the green one. So once things are dry and you put more color on, you're going to see it kind of stays exactly where you put it, a little bit stronger. So I'm going to make these shadows on this side darker and thicker. These are still going to have little shadows, but they're going to be really thin, like where the balloon kind of comes together. We're going to blend them out. We're not going to leave them like that. So like this one. And then as they dry, they'll get a little lighter as well. I think I have to go a little bit darker on this whole center one. There, that looks a little better. Okay, so now, again, I'm using this Phthalo Payne's Gray combo here, and I'm going to do the same thing. So this side and this side of this little thing is going to be the darkest, kind of thickest, facing away from the sun. This side of this one, as it curls away from the sun, will be darkest, but that doesn't mean there won't be and this up here. I'm even going to take some yellow. Rinse off my brush really good. Maybe even some brown. So basically I'm doing this line up here in like a more yellowy color than just putting blue on there. Because again, it's going to be in shadow, but it's going to take on the qualities of everything around it. So that highlight. To make a little bit more. Now I'm just experimenting and playing. So again, you can paint these just with shadow on one side and light on the other side, and don't have to paint in all of these the pieces that kind of come together. This is a little more complicated. I said I wasn't going to do it, but I am doing it. I'm so sorry. And you can make them just kind of flat washes from light to dark and practicing that gradient, not flat washes, gradient washes. And that would be great as well. All right, this is my last little bit. Contrast always makes things fun. All right, I'm going to blend this out just a little bit, and then we're going to take a look at our whole piece. We are done. Thank you for painting these lovely watercolor balloons with me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you for the suggestion from one of my followers. These were super fabulous to kind of push me out of my comfort zone. And I hope you enjoyed following along. Don't forget to check out the description for links to supplies and materials. Thank you so much for being here and following along. I super appreciate you. And share this with a friend, like and subscribe. And then we will see you very soon, or I will see you very soon for our next watercolor journal page. Take care, y'all. Happy painting.